The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the crisp December air as I arranged my handmade ornaments on the wooden tables outside my garage. This was supposed to be the first year of my Christmas market, a small but charming community event where neighbors could buy local crafts, sip hot cocoa, and share holiday cheer. The lights twinkled, wreaths hung from every available surface, and I was already envisioning the smiling faces of families strolling through the little aisles. It wasn't long before my phone rang. The number was familiar. My HOA president. "This market, it's against our regulations," she said, her tone clipped, almost rehearsed. I felt my stomach twist. I had checked every rule, every bylaw. My permits were in order, my neighbors had given verbal approval, and I had no intention of breaking any laws. "I've done everything by the book," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Still, it's private property," she insisted. "We can't allow it." I knew this wasn't just about rules. The HOA had always had a reputation for overreaching, meddling in the smallest details of residents' lives. I wasn't going to let them bully me out of my holiday plans. I hung up and called the non-emergency line of our local police department. I explained the situation. A small holiday market, fully legal, threatened by overzealous HOA regulations. They said they'd send someone to check it out, just to ensure there were no violations. By the time Officer Martinez arrived, I was arranging the last of my candle displays. "Everything looks fine here," he said, notebook in hand. "You've got permits, no complaints, and you're not obstructing traffic." I smiled, feeling vindicated. The officer left with a polite wave, and I returned to welcoming the first trickle of customers. But the HOA wasn't done. The next day, I received a sharply worded email warning that further events would result in fines and potential legal action. My heart sank. This was bigger than just Christmas ornaments and hot cocoa. It felt personal, as if the HOA had made it their mission to squash my small joy. That night, I locked the doors to my garage and stared at the twinkling lights. The market had been a success so far, but the threat lingered, a dark cloud over what should have been a cheerful season. And then, almost on instinct, I realized maybe calling the police wasn't just a safety precaution. Maybe it was a shield. I didn't know then that the real twist was yet to come. The following morning, I woke to a flurry of messages from neighbors. Some were congratulatory, praising the market's charm, while others were nervous, whispering about the HOA's threats. It was clear this wasn't just my fight anymore. People were watching, curious to see if the little holiday market could withstand the HOA's pressure. Determined not to back down, I spent the morning setting up a few more tables. Hand-painted signs read, "Local Joy for the Holidays," and I even baked cookies shaped like stars and snowflakes. The air smelled of sugar, cinnamon, and pine needles, a scent that seemed to soften even the sharpest edges of winter. Then came another knock at the door. I opened it to see the HOA president herself, clipboard in hand and eyes narrowed. "I told you this market is not allowed," she said, voice sharp. "You're risking fines, legal action." "I'm aware," I interrupted calmly, holding her gaze. "I also called the police yesterday. They said everything is fine. If there's a problem, it's a legal matter, not a personal one." Her face twitched in annoyance. She scribbled something on her clipboard, muttering under her breath, and left without another word. The tension, however, didn't dissipate. By mid-afternoon, a small crowd had gathered. Not just shoppers, but curious onlookers drawn by the whispers of HOA drama. I waved to a few friends who had come to support me, grateful for the silent encouragement. Some offered to help manage traffic and keep the line safe, just in case the HOA tried to escalate things. It was around this time that I noticed a uniformed officer quietly making his way through the crowd. My heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but a strange mix of pride and apprehension. I had called the police to protect a small, innocent event, and now it seemed official attention was on our side. He approached me with a smile. "Everything's still fine here. Just keep doing what you're doing and call us if there's any trouble." I nodded, grateful, but couldn't shake a nagging feeling. What if the HOA decided to challenge this, legally or otherwise? What if their next move wasn't a polite phone call, but something more calculated? I busied myself arranging gifts and lighting more candles, trying to ignore the undercurrent of tension. The market had turned into a spectacle, one that blended holiday cheer with subtle rebellion. People laughed, sipped cocoa, and admired handmade crafts, unaware of the behind-the-scenes battle. As dusk fell, the glow of the string lights cast a warm golden haze across the driveway. For a brief moment, I felt like everything was perfect, and then I realized, in the back of my mind, that the next day would bring the true test of courage, confrontation, and perhaps revelation. Little did I know, the secret I had carried quietly for years, the one I thought was irrelevant here, was about to turn the tables completely. The next morning I woke to an icy wind and the faint smell of smoke from nearby chimneys. My Christmas market had grown overnight. Neighbors whispered that the HOA was planning a visit to shut it down officially. I could feel my chest tighten, but I refused to let fear ruin the spirit of the day. I bundled up, tied fairy lights along the fences, and placed a small bell on the entrance. The first visitors arrived with smiles and laughter, oblivious to the brewing storm. I handed out cookies and pointed families toward my ornament tables, doing my best to keep the mood cheerful. Then, a sleek black SUV pulled up, and I saw them, the HOA president flanked by 2 board members. They stepped out, clipboards in hand, scanning the market like soldiers inspecting an encampment. Their expressions were cold, calculated. "I told you this is unauthorized," the president barked, marching toward me. "You need to shut this down immediately or we'll escalate. Fines, legal action, everything." I squared my shoulders, keeping my tone steady. "Everything here is permitted, and the police have already verified it. If you have a legal concern, you're welcome to take it through proper channels." Her eyes narrowed. "I don't care about the police. This is private property, and we have authority." A tense silence fell over the crowd. Families stopped in their tracks, unsure of what was happening. Then, instinctively, I reached inside my coat and unclipped my badge. The metal glinted in the winter sunlight. The board members froze, their mouths opened, but no words came out. The president's expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then something like fear. You're a cop?" she stammered. "Yes," I said firmly, holding the badge up. "And I'm fully within my rights to run this event safely. Any interference could be considered harassment." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The threat that had felt like a wall crumbling over my market dissolved into awkward silence. People whispered, some chuckled, realizing the irony of a small neighborhood battle against a uniformed officer. The president straightened her jacket and muttered something under her breath, clearly calculating her next move. But it was too late. The dynamic had changed. She backed off, mumbling, "We'll reconsider." I smiled politely and returned my badge to its hidden spot. The crowd erupted into applause, not just for the Christmas decorations, but for the unexpected victory. Children ran past me with cocoa in hand, parents exchanged relieved smiles, and I realized something profound. My small act of courage, combined with my position, had turned an intimidating confrontation into a peaceful resolution. As the market continued, glowing with lights and laughter, I understood that sometimes authority isn't about power. It's about timing, presence, and knowing when to reveal a secret. But as the day wound down, I knew the final chapter wasn't over. The HOA might have retreated, but their next move could be unpredictable, and the balance of power could shift in a single phone call. The sun dipped behind the rooftops as the last visitors trickled away, leaving behind a scattering of cookie crumbs, discarded wrapping paper, and the lingering warmth of laughter. I stood in the middle of the driveway, surveying the small Christmas market that had become a battleground of wills just hours earlier. The air was crisp, but the glow of string lights cast a golden haze, making everything feel almost magical. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. The HOA board hadn't returned, and the rumor of my badge seemed to have spread through the neighborhood faster than any flyer or invitation could. People now looked at me with a mix of awe and gratitude, not for the crafts I'd sold, but for the courage I'd displayed. The market had become more than just ornaments and cocoa. It was a symbol that joy and community could stand firm, even against overbearing authority. Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace with a cup of hot chocolate, my mind replaying the day's events. The confrontation with the HOA president had felt surreal. One moment I was worried about fines and legal threats, the next a simple revelation. A badge clipped discreetly to my coat had shifted the entire dynamic. It wasn't the badge itself, I realized, but what it represented. Accountability, authority, and the quiet power of standing your ground. By the next morning, messages flooded my phone. Neighbors who had been hesitant to speak up now sent texts of support and thanks. One even jokingly asked if I could patrol the neighborhood for holiday cheer next year. I chuckled, but deep down, I knew this market wasn't just about the holiday season. It had strengthened bonds, reminded people of the power of community, and even nudged a few overzealous board members toward humility. A few days later, the HOA president called. I answered, expecting tension, but her tone was surprisingly measured. "We've reviewed the situation, and your market will continue, provided it adheres to local regulations," she said. No threats, no fines, just cautious acknowledgement. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. As the winter weeks passed, I continued hosting the market, each day filled with laughter, holiday music, and the scent of baked treats. Families who had once hesitated to come now arrived early, bringing friends and neighbors. The market had grown, yes, but more importantly, it had survived and thrived because I had refused to let intimidation dictate my plans. That Christmas, as snowflakes gently fell, I stood behind my table and watched the lights reflect in the eyes of children, parents, and neighbors alike. The badge had been a secret until the right moment, but the courage it symbolized was something I carried long before the first ornament was hung. In the end, it wasn't just about winning a battle with the HOA, it was about standing up for joy, community, and the small moments that make life brighter, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And for me, that Christmas market would always be a reminder that sometimes the most powerful gifts are the ones you give yourself. Enjoying this story of standing up to the HOA and protecting a community Christmas market? Hit that subscribe button to catch more real-life tales of unexpected twists and personal wins. Give this a like if you found it inspiring, and drop a comment below. What would you have done if your holiday plans were challenged?